What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Ever since his release, Rengar has always been one of the more controversial champions in League of Legends, at least in terms of how he's designed. Many see Rengar as a champion who is poorly designed and suffers from a lot of gameplay health and fairness issues, in the sense that he's frustrating to play against and lacks meaningful counterplay. It was a lot worse when he was released, and he received his first rework in April 2014, which was about 18 months or so after his initial release. Rengar was reworked after his release faster than any champion to have ever existed, and the original Rengar rework didn't actually change much of his design, since it was meant to keep his entire gameplay style and themes intact. And although they did succeed in keeping his character intact with that rework, it's hard to know for sure if Riot actually solved his gameplay issues, and the rework is often regarded as something that was kind of just a band-aid fix to some major problems, and we've heard bits and pieces of a second Rengar rework tossed around here and there from Rioters. However, recently there's been a significant update about this potential second Rengar rework, in the form of the news of the Assassin's rework likely coming towards the end of the year. The rework is supposedly going to focus on overhauling the Assassin class, similar to how the Mages, AD Carries, and Juggernauts were updated already, but for the longest time it wasn't entirely clear if Rengar actually fit into the category of an Assassin. When you talk about assassins, most people assume the mid laners, champions like Zed, Talon, and LeBlanc, the hyper-mobile, high-intensity type of champion. And although it was certainly likely that Rengar fit into that category, we never knew for sure, at least until now. Just yesterday, Riot Meddler commented on the official League of Legends forum saying that the rework team does see Rengar as an assassin, and that it's very likely that it'll be worked on for what he described as the end of the year class update, which is almost certainly going to be the Assassin update. He also brought up the idea that they were maybe considering the topic of whether or not they wanted Rengar to play out as a diver or as a skirmisher type of champion, and he also talked a little bit about Rengar's design, saying that Rengar does have a lot of problems in his kit, and the initial idea with Rengar's design was to avoid those problems by giving him a much longer time to kill on his targets, but that part didn't exactly work out, and since he can kind of kill people almost instantly now, his kit has a lot of issues. Now, I would say that the biggest problem Rengar has is probably his mechanic of stealth. Stealth in League of Legends is inherently unhealthy, since although the mechanic does kind of have counterplay, it doesn't have outplay potential, at least in the way that it's implemented. Stealth requires you to buy an item or have a specific ability on a specific champion to be able to counterplay, and that's not the ideal form of counterplay that you want a champion to have. It's not really good design to be absolutely forced to buy an item or to pick a champion for a specific ability. Sure, items can be used as a form of counterplay, as can certain abilities, they just can't be the only form of counterplay. It's not a fun thing to get screwed over because you just accidentally forgot to buy a pink ward or something like that. The ideal form of counterplay is something that you can outplay through raw skill and decision making. And although they did kind of try that with Rengar and made his stealth have the indicator, it's honestly kind of just not the case, and it's potentially impossible to implement stealth in a way that is both fair for the Rengar player and for the opponent. And so it's not entirely the fault of Rengar, more of the mechanic of stealth as a whole. And the Riot designers know this, and they definitely understand this, and it's why the last champion that had stealth in their kit was released in 2012, Kha'Zix, nearly 4 years ago. It's pretty much impossible to make stealth a healthy mechanic without also making it completely useless, at least at a design standpoint, and I highly doubt that Riot will ever release a champion that has stealth on it ever again. And for the champions that do already have stealth in their kits, it's difficult to remove it since it is often, especially with Rengar, a super core and important part of their gameplay and their theme. And taking away the stealth would change them into a completely different champion. As for Rengar's stealth in specific, there is a couple things that are a bit different to it that make it a little bit worse than other stealth that exists on different types of champions. And with Rengar, it's because it's one of maybe it's actually the only form of stealth that is used solely as an initiation tool and pretty much for nothing else, which is not really a good thing. Stealth being used as an initiation tool is much worse since it causes it to contribute to much more unfair gameplay patterns. Dying to someone jumping out at you from stealth often feels like there was just nothing you could do, like you had no chance to react, but when someone uses stealth as an escape, at least you feel like you have a chance to do something about it, and it's a lot more fair. So Rengar's stealth initiation power results in him having a much more unhealthy assassin pattern. Although it is somewhat balanced, kind of, since he has it at the trade-off of having no escape unlike other assassins, it's much more frustrating and unfair to play against than other assassin interactions. However, it is true that stealth is a very core aspect of Rengar's theme and his gameplay. So even if he does get new abilities, it's probably not possible to remove stealth entirely from his kit, otherwise he's at risk at no longer being Rengar anymore. So there are two potential solutions that I can see as an option to maybe fix the unhealthy design of Rengar's stealth. First, in a potential rework, you could turn his stealth into an escape instead of an initiation tool. When stealth is used as an escape, it's much more fair to play against, and although it still has the same design problems, they become much less apparent and much less impactful since the abilities themselves are just less frustrating to play against. It would probably take some clever tricks to make his stealth into an escape though, and it might also be very difficult to design it for an ability that still makes sense for his theme in that way. The second option that you could do is to maybe make his time to kill on a target much longer, essentially turning him into a skirmisher or a bruiser instead of an assassin. This is probably a bit easier than making his stealth an escape, however he still does lose a bit of his theme, and his gameplay especially would have to get changed a lot for this, to the point where he would also, again, be at risk of becoming a new champion altogether. It'd be like if you changed someone like LeBlanc, who's a burst mage assassin, into Ryze, who's a tankier sustained DPS mage. It's just such a huge change in play style, and as such probably isn't possible to do in a way that doesn't at least still contain a lot of assassin elements. However, Rengar does also have some awesome aspects to his design already. As Riot Meddler mentioned, his passive creates a lot of interesting gameplay about changing how and where he wants to fight. His ferocity resource is super unique and fun to play with, and his theme and personality have been incorporated into his gameplay extremely well. So he's not a total lost cause like someone like Yorick or Urgot. He definitely does have some decent things going for him. It's honestly really just his ultimate, I would say, more specifically the stealth on his ultimate, that causes most if not all of his design problems. So, should Rengar get new abilities? Well, maybe he should get a new ultimate, but what if instead you focused on solving the problem of stealth as a whole across all of League of Legends instead? Stealth is inherently an unhealthy mechanic, but it doesn't have to be. What if instead of doing an assassin rework at the end of the year, you just did a stealth rework to change the entire mechanic in the game across the board all at once? Now, I'm not saying they should do that, and they probably aren't going to, just that it's an alternative to maybe changing Rengar, since Rengar's problems aren't entirely his fault, but rather the fault of the overarching mechanic of stealth itself, although you do still have to contribute some of it to the way that the stealth is implemented in his kit. But it would be hard to know how to change stealth in general to make it healthy without it also becoming kind of useless, honestly, so who knows. I mean, the design teams at Riot are super creative when it comes to designing abilities and working on mechanics though, so although it would be really difficult, I can't say that it would be impossible. Also, Riot Frozon mentioned on Reddit a while back about how they tested using a global indicator for Rengar's stealth, with like that exclamation mark thingy just being global, as well as the noise effect being global, but it didn't really work out, and it resulted in a lot more pain than benefit, and it sounds like it might have even been worse than the current implementation of the mechanic. He also mentioned that there are reasonable options in the current stealth that Rengar has in terms of counterplay, with that exclamation mark mechanic, but it's possible that it's not enough, and other options they tested to affect stealth as a whole, such as potentially increasing the range of the sweeper trinket by 500 yards, just made Rengar's stealth kind of useless, honestly. So I'm honestly not entirely sure what Riot should do with Rengar, as I personally have a really hard time coming up with any solutions to his problems that don't also ruin his character in a significant way, and since I can't think of a reasonable solution, I can't really be sure as to the direction that I believe Riot should take with him. There's a lot of options though, and it's pretty clear that Rengar should at least probably get a little bit of attention. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about Rengar in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you didn't, hit that dislike, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.